You're listening to Trek FM.
Want to join in the conversation and share your thoughts on this episode? Join the Babel Conference, our listeners' discussion group on Facebook. Just type BABEL into the Facebook search field, and we'll look forward to seeing you there.
This is Steve Sansweet of Rancho Obi-Wan, and you're listening to the 602 Club.
Hello and welcome to the 602 Club, Trek FM's local watering hole. So excited to be back. And with me, as she is almost every single week, the one and only particle physicist. Oh wait, no, that's the other Christy Morris from the other universe. My bad. Sorry, Christy.
Yeah. I'm glad to be back and in the correct universe. Hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to tell. Not really sure.
Do you still have all your limbs?
Oh, I was missing a couple of toes, strangely enough. So,
You might see them running down the hallway.
This is true. It could be. Well, we're excited to be back. We're going to wrap up what we've been talking about over the last few weeks. We had been going through the Cloverfield films, and this week we finally reach, the film that was released on Netflix, the Cloverfield Paradox. And so, hence us, making fun of a paradox. Luckily, it is the real Christy Morris with us. We're so excited to be here with you. Don't forget, as we're recording this, Christy, did you know as we're recording today is International Podcast Day?
I did not.
Yeah. So, which is kind of fun. So we're podcasting. Awesome. We're podcasting International Podcast Day, and we hope everybody had a great time celebrating their favorite podcasts here on the 30th of September, 2019 as we're recording this. But you know what? If you like podcasts, one of the best things you can truly do to help your podcast out, and I know you hear this probably on every podcast you listen to, but give us a rating and review, Apple Podcasts or iTunes. And it truly is the best way to help out the show that you love. Take 5 minutes, give them a star rating review, let them know what you think of the show. Specifically, we ask you to do that with the 602 Club because it helps more people find the show and it really helps us grow. So we got to thank all the people who have already spent the time in their very busy lives to do that. We really appreciate that. But you can help us out. So do that. We'll read your review out on the show as well. So if you take the time to do it, we'll call you out on the show and read your review here on the show. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts as well. So maybe, you don't have, you're not an Apple user. You can find us anywhere podcasts can be gotten pretty much. We're on Twitter at TrekFM. We're on Facebook at facebook.com/TrekFM. And then you can find the listeners only discussion group, which is the Babel Conference over there on Facebook. Type Babel into the search field there on the old Facebook. Or if you're on the website at Trek.fm, you can hit discussion on any of the menu bars and that will bring you there. As well. And then last but not least, you can hit Christy and I up with an email. Go to trek.fm/contact, choose a show, choose the 602 Club, and that'll come to us. And we want to say a quick thank you to all of our associate producers. International Podcast Day, there's so many podcasts out there. And honestly, we have so many podcasts coming to you from the Trek FM network. There's absolutely no way we can do this alone. So we have some great associate producers here through Patreon. Ken Tripp, Davis Grayson, Wyatt Millett, and Daniel Noah. They've been supporting the show for a long time. We really appreciate that. And part of that is because every single month they support the network to make sure that this show, as well as every other show on the network, keeps coming to you. So you can do that too at patreon.com/TrekFM. You can become a part of our team. We've got some great contribution levels that have some even extra perks. But honestly, in the end, every little bit helps. And if everybody who listened to Trek FM just gave us $1 a month, it would be huge. So please go over to patreon.com/TrekFM and support us so we can keep doing this as long as possible. So, Christy, coming back to Cloverfield, this is a weird one because it was another movie that there was a script that came in and they turned it into, just like with 10 Cloverfield Lane, a Cloverfield movie. And then not only that, but once Abrams decided that they, wanted to make this into the Cloverfield universe, they created some extra scenes to kind of help create this link to the rest of the franchise. And so, first, how did you feel when you saw this? Because I know one of the things you had mentioned in the outline is just the way this was marketed to everybody, because the trailer for it dropped during the Super Bowl, saying that, right after the game, you can go watch this mysterious new movie on Netflix.
Right. Yeah, it did definitely fit with the way that they've done the marketing for all of the other Cloverfield movies, with that mysterious nature. I love that the marketing was just very limited, and definitely this time different in that it was immediately available on a streaming service and didn't even have a theatrical release, which is kind of funny then when you read into why it wasn't a brilliant marketing idea. It actually became their budget was so much higher than Paramount felt the film was going to bring in, unfortunately. So they decided maybe we should try streaming for the first time instead of straight to theaters and then streaming after. And I think that part worked in their favor and probably helped them out a lot with the numbers. But I enjoyed having, like I said, that mysterious nature again of limited amount of marketing before the movie came out.
Yeah, I just remember being so like, there's a new Cloverfield thing. And they're doing it on Netflix. That's interesting. And, it's funny because I don't know if it was just, so many things come out on streaming now. It seems like even now, as opposed to then, even more so, there's just so much that's happening. It seems like there's some new original, and really original means that most likely, your favorite streaming service bought the rights to the movie.
Right, not that they came up with everything.
So, did you and your husband, did you guys watch this right after the game or soon afterwards?
Actually, my husband did first, and then I ended up catching it about 1/4 of the way through and watching the last 3/4 of the movie. And then I had to go back and watch the first part. But I was really interested because he had told me about the original Cloverfield movie. And then I loved Cloverfield and 10 Cloverfield Lane. So I was like, well, naturally, I'm sure I'll like this one. And both the first two films seemed so different. I thought, well, this one will probably be similar enough so they're in the same world, but be its own thing. So yeah, we watched it pretty soon after it came out. What about you?
Actually, I had never seen this until just yesterday, as of this recording. So yeah.
Oh, so till I told you about it.
Yeah, no. I mean, I knew, obviously, I'd seen the preview, and it just was one that I never watched. And I will say, I think that's because some other people I knew had watched it and were like, it's okay, And so it just, again, this evening, before we were recording, my wife and I I've been showing her Battlestar Galactica for her first time. And there was a preview before the episode for Good Omens from Amazon, which is an Amazon original off the Neil Gaiman book they made a series out of. And we have not had a chance to watch that. And it's just like there's so much stuff out there that I feel like is coming out that if I don't hear good things about, I go to something else. And so this was one where I didn't necessarily hear the best feedback on. So I was like, I just passed it up at that point. And so I wanted to ask you, because all of 10 Cloverfield Lane, I think, found a way to integrate itself. We talked about that with the Cloverfield universe. But at the same time, kind of feel like its own thing. How do you feel like this one did with that idea of, they added the different scenes to connect, and how do you feel like this one does as it, tries to connect itself with Cloverfield?
I think they connected it well with the other Cloverfield films as far as the overall themes. I think all of them really discuss the most valuable parts of existence, or how humanity responds during disasters and how that can expose your true character. But aside from that, I think this one in particular feels like it doesn't quite mesh as well with the other two films. It feels like the monster of Clover, as we kind of know it, was just thrown in at the end. And that really this movie was meant to be, and maybe would have been better without having that included. That maybe they could have tied it together just by saying this person was related to Howard, or that there is also an alien attack happening on Earth, but you don't have to show things happening. I don't know. Maybe they could have mentioned it sooner in the movie as well. It just felt like overall that it was more of a space movie than it was a Cloverfield movie.
Do you feel like it tried maybe too hard to try to connect all the dots?
Yeah, because I think exactly what I'm saying is true when you look at how the writing was put together. Originally, this was that story, God Particle, which was more of a space-related story, and it was about the Higgs boson and everything. But I felt like later they threw in the dialogue, the Cloverfield Paradox, and you're like, oh yeah, because it's the name of the movie. And then, exactly what we said, with the monster being kind of thrown in, that was literally thrown in because it wasn't part of the original written story, God Particle. So I do feel like those things are a bit of a stretch, and maybe they could have done it in a different way to tie them together.
Yeah, I think with 10 Cloverfield Lane, they allude to the fact that the things are happening in like other places in the world. So you get the feeling as though what happened in New York is happening there. And that it's all connected somehow, but it's not explicit. And this movie, I felt like what the main issue is that they made it too explicit. That basically their actions here with the Shepherd Project are what cause everything else that happened in the other two movies.
Right.
And I think that's the problem, is that you took what was this kind of mysterious and kind of unexplained monster phenomena, and then you tried to give a scientific answer for it, basically. And they specially do that. And I really love the inclusion of Donald Logue playing the conspiracy theorist. He's Harvey Bullock. And, I think he's the best, one of the best parts of Gotham in general. But I think that's the issue. Like, what had been more nebulous, we kind of, we actually made really explicit. And that was the problem, is that this movie answered too many. It seems weird to say that, but this movie answered too many questions for its own good, really, about the whole Cloverfield paradox.
Yeah, it's perfect that you say that, because I remember we were talking about with 10 Cloverfield Lane that it leaves so many things open to question, whereas this one does the opposite. That it feels too much like we want to take the events of the last two and explain it all to you, rather than we want to continue on the journey we were on.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. No, I just totally agree. So I'm interested, too, because I do feel like, so the last two movies that we talked about in this universe was the fact that the cast was a real strong point. In both films, I felt like we felt like almost the entire cast, for the most part, in both of the movies, a really strong selling point. 10 Cloverfield Lane, there's only 3 actors that you spend most of the time with anyway, so they have to be good or the movie's going to suck. Right. And then in the first movie, I feel like for the most part, both of us liked almost the entire cast. And we mentioned specifically they sold us the story. So with this movie, I feel like they have the same thing in front of them. Like, they have the same challenge in front of us. You need to sell us the character story, so we kind of forget about the crazy part that's going on, and we just we get involved in the emotional stakes, the character stakes. How do you feel like the cast does in this movie, and was there anybody that stood out to you that you really liked?
For me, there were 4 people out of the whole cast that really stood out, and the rest of them, it started to feel like it was just too many people. My favorite absolutely was the actress that played Hamilton. I would butcher her name if I try to pronounce it. I think it might possibly be Nigerian. But yes, her last name is like Mbatha Raw. She plays the main character of Ava Hamilton. Her monologue toward the end that she records for the alternate version of herself makes me cry every time I see this movie. She's so good. And I love that they had, usually in a world I feel like where we see in sci-fi that often the captain is a man, that they had a woman end up leading all of this. You know, that it did start off as a man, but then it developed to where she's the only one left of all of them. And so I thought it was interesting to go that route, and explore a new way of telling that kind of story. But other than her, I loved Daniel Bruhl as Schmidt. I've seen him in Inglourious Bastards, and he was brilliant.
And Civil War.
In this.
So, yeah.
Oh, yeah, true.
So he plays Zuma.
He's a good villain.
Yeah, he is very good.
And then Chris O'Dowd, I have to mention as Mundy, because I love him, especially from Bridesmaids.
Yeah, he's pretty funny.
And then the last one I actually loved for her more dramatic stuff was, I think you pronounce it Zhang Ziyi. She played Tam.
Mm-hmm.
I loved her from Memoirs of a Geisha, as well as this. But I think those 4 were the strongest in this whole movie.
Yeah, you know, I feel like, and this is the thing, like, I feel like everybody in the cast does a serviceable job with what they're given. Mm-hmm. You know, I don't feel like anybody's bad here or phoning it in or anything like that. I think the thing that, one, I think you mentioned earlier, and I think you rightly pointed your finger at, specifically, was that it just feels like there's too many cast members. And so,
yeah,
we seem to kind of lose any feeling on whose story should really be the most important here, which, again, the other movies did not do. And in fact, I think their real strength was figuring out how to really just focus on a few main characters and, you know, leave the rest out of it. And then I think that the other thing that this movie doesn't do as good a job with is making me care quite enough about their story arcs, so that, again, I kind of forget all of the other things that are going on, like space station in peril, and, you know, possible alternate universes, and
yeah,
all of those things. I kind of felt like I don't feel like they really truly, and I think you're right, the actress who plays Hamilton, I think she gets the most moving things to do, but I found, and I'll just be honest, I found myself just not caring about what anybody's going through, because nothing was just grabbing me story-wise for any of the characters. And then you had people like, I feel like Elizabeth Debicki is just completely wasted as the alternate timeline Jensen. Like, she barely has anything to do, and then, of course, she turns out to be a villain, which, shocker.
And they don't make her sympathetic at all.
No, not at all. Not at all.
She's always mistrusted.
Yes, exactly. Like, that's the thing. Like, this really needed to be, I felt like, again, another character study movie in many of the ways which 10 Cloverfield Lane was like, but you needed to transfer that onto the space station where the stakes are even higher. And I just didn't feel like they were able to find a way to focus enough. And I do think that part of that is that they spend that time with Ava's husband, Roger Davies, as her husband, Michael. And I feel like that's a huge mistake because you're taking time away that you should probably just be focusing on this space station so you can add more complexity to the storyline with these characters, give them more depth and more time so that you really care about. And that's where you could have rewritten the storyline a little bit there for Jensen and given, again, I love Elizabeth Debicki. She's so good. I mean, if you haven't seen her in The Night Manager with Tom Hiddleston, it's fantastic. So she's amazing. And then, of course, she's in Man from U.N.C.L.E., which is another brilliant film. But so she can do greatness when it comes to acting. And here, again, I feel like they just sell everybody short. And I just put it this way. If I'm checking my phone a lot to see what time it is while I'm watching a movie, that's never a good sign. And I found,
because you're waiting for it to be over.
yeah. I'm like, oh wow, this movie's or especially these days, like when you're streaming, right? And you're depending on where you're watching it, but I'll hit the top of the Apple TV trackpad, and it'll pull up the status bar to show you where you are in the movie, and I'll be like, this movie still has 45 minutes? What? So that happened quite a few times in this movie, and part of it was because I like all of these actors that are in this movie. Like, I've seen them in other things. I think they're good actors. They're like you mentioned, every single one of them has been in something else.
Yeah.
And I was disappointed because I felt like they sold them short into a story that, in all ways, just felt like a massive space cliche. And or, chasing around arms and legs. It's like, which is really sad.
I didn't feel quite that upset about it, or I guess I would say not wowed by it. I did still enjoy it, and I felt like we kind of needed that comic relief of the arm being separated without causing him any pain. But it did feel like at sometimes it went more to the horror direction with the way that they surprised you with the paradox issues that it didn't quite do in the original Cloverfield. But then, I guess 10 Cloverfield Lane did go that direction, so who am I to say that part didn't fit into the whole universe? But I don't know, I still found it pretty enjoyable in spite of some of those story issues.
Well, and hey, I'm the moments where, to me, that it was actually the strongest were the moments where it was going down those horror, like it was walking down those horror corridors, like when they're hearing things in the corridors and it turns out that there's a human being inside the bulkhead. Like, what the heck? Like, that is...
You're thinking it's going to be an alien on board.
Yes, it is creepy and scary, and like, you're wondering if, okay, is that how we're going to be connecting to the Cloverfield universe and everything? So yes, all of that, I think, is, really well done. Liked it a lot. I just felt like that there wasn't enough of that, and that they never found a way to truly connect with me story-wise, and that's really important. When you're doing this kind of film, and this is kind of a problem that I feel like I have with a lot of like horror-type movies, is that unless you find a good character arc for the characters, I'm not going to care about the cliched ways you're trying to make people die or you're trying to scare me,
right.
So this just wasn't able to do that. But, again, I'm not discounting, none of these people are bad actors, and there are plenty of movies that I love them and other things. I just kind of wish, I feel like they deserved more, the same way the other characters in the other Cloverfield movies got. Honestly, I felt like they were just better serviced. So, but
yeah,
glad they worked better for you.
Yeah. And how did you feel about the whole paradox issue in general of, exploring there being alternate dimensions that are all existing at the same time, and now we're crossing
the streams? Never cross the streams.
Yeah.
Didn't they watch Ghostbusters?
Right.
I felt like it was a solid idea. Like the idea of doing that whole that we transferred into a parallel universe. It's very kind of like Star Trek-y, which is not a bad thing at all. It's a great idea. I don't know if they spent enough time really exploring what that idea means, though, in the story.
Yeah, I felt like they could have explained better how the Shepherd system worked, because other than saying it's the particle accelerator, I'm like, okay, whatever that means. I am not a physicist. I don't know if you knew that, but so that means gibberish to me. So
yeah, I think that's exactly the thing. Like, this movie sciences in weird areas, and the way that it's scienced here, what I felt like is that it kind of became, in Star Trek they do that a lot. They call it technobabble, and we're gonna technobabble our way out of a problem. And I understood from watching enough Star Trek the idea of like the parallel universe thing and all of that stuff, and kind of how this particle accelerator would get them there, with the idea that like the particle accelerator just by setting it off again, that it would immediately send them back to the same place. I was like, really? Like, so if you went to one parallel universe, wouldn't there be other parallel universes? And wouldn't there be the chance that you would accidentally land up in one of those parallel universes and not just the... So I felt like... And this is the thing. If I'm starting to think all this stuff while I'm watching the movie, that's a bad sign, because I shouldn't be thinking about that kind of stuff. I should be engrossed in the rest of the story, so...
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head exactly with it. I told my husband, I was like, I hate the phrase plot holes, but this was a big plot hole, because if there are supposedly infinite parallel dimensions, and now they've caused this massive energy burst that, catapulted them into another one, then setting it off again wouldn't just take you back to the place you came from. It would mean there are still infinite possibilities of other worlds or dimensions you could end up in. So, I mean, they saved their own butts by making it do what they wanted it to, but it really... I'm going to nerd out and say there were too many variables.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And I think part of that goes back to what we were talking about with the cast, that, when it comes to the parallel Earth story, the parallel world story, that if I'm thinking too much about the Shepherd and project, in this Cloverfield Paradox, it's because I'm not thinking enough about the character arcs. Like, I'm not engrossed enough in the story, and that's, that became the issue. And I think, it's clear that both of us were on that wavelength where we just weren't connecting enough with the character arcs. You liked them more than I did, but you were still also having the same problem I did in the end with the story. So it's like, oh, well.
Mm-hmm. And I will add the other one that bothered me that I thought of before you mentioned that issue was when Voskov, I think is how you pronounce it. Am I crazy? He was the Russian engineer, Volkov. When he looks in the mirror and his eye moves, it was a freaky thing to do. And then, kind of makes sense later with him having the worms inside him. Maybe they caused it. I don't know.
He's got worms.
Yeah.
That's what we're going to call it.
But having him talk to himself like he suddenly has another being possessing him did not ever make sense or get explained. It just was kind of a useless plot point. Yeah. I'm just going to throw that out there.
100% agree with you. I'm glad you brought it up because I had forgotten about that idea. But now that you bring it up, I'm like, what the heck was that all about? And I get that we've it was just weird. Yeah, the fact that the worms got transported into him, but also then the like cube thing that they needed got transported into him.
The gyroscope.
Yeah, which was very strange. Like, and I got the idea that they had displaced the other station from the parallel universe, but they didn't quite explain like why they had displaced what they like. So can there only be one version?
There can only be one.
A version of the person in the universe? Is that what it is?
Oh, apparently not, because there were two Avas in the same universe.
Or was
there was
she
Ava in
just
space
telling
and
her a
Ava on Earth?
story?
Well, that's true. I don't know. There were videos.
Yeah. So, but did because that Ava had come into that, like it killed the other Ava or something? Or see, that's the thing I don't understand. Like, why did it displace certain people and not others? Or is that just the unpredictability?
Maybe that's just the chaos of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See, it answered
Anyway,
too many
plot
questions,
holes.
but then it didn't answer the problem is it answered all the wrong questions, right?
There you go.
You know,
Yeah.
like all the questions you don't really want answered, but then it answered these questions like, that's...
But we did find out where the worms went, so.
That's true, we did. And
It
yeah,
was a very important question.
and Volkov got worms. So, yeah. What did you think? You know, like what you mentioned some of the themes that they kind of play with in here, and kind of this whole idea of like what matters most in life, how you deal with high pressure situations, and I don't know how did any of these really strike you as that they really played with any of these themes, or that they just kind of had them there?
I did always feel like, and I felt like they were in all of the Cloverfield movies, that one theme of your character is what's most important, or like the people you love are what's most important. And I like that they even throw it in with Ava's husband, Michael, saying, we're going to need some good people to help us get things up and going again. And the little girl says, we're going to need a lot of good people. But, you know, it kind of brings up that point over and over again throughout all three movies of that there's good people and there's bad people, and that disaster or high pressure situations will show the true nature of a person. And it showed that Jensen was a bad person, in my opinion, at least. I mean, I guess, you know, when you look at the needs of the many over the needs of the few, maybe she had a point. She was willing to kill 3 people to save 8 billion on Earth if that was what resulted. But, like, there was no way for her to know that killing those people was going to save the planet. So it's an interesting idea, but I don't know. I feel like I always want to take something away from a movie.
Yeah.
And maybe that's wishful thinking, but I felt like I took away from it that valuing your time with those you love is the most important thing.
Yeah, no, I think you've definitely hit kind of one of the main themes on the head, and I'm right with you. Like, to me, a movie that is most successful is one that doesn't just give me enjoy. I say that, but you know, I don't think there's any grand theme for Dumb and Dumber, but that movie just gives me enjoyment, and I laugh at it, and you know, I think there's value in that. But on a whole, I'd say that the movies that I like the most in life tend to be the ones that keep me thinking afterwards. And I think that probably is the thing about this movie that I find the most disappointing, is that I don't feel like there was nothing that truly jumped out at me and something that I would kind of like take away, like as like a message or a lesson or anything like that. And part of that and I think, you know, we mentioned it before, but I think in the end, I think the thing about this film is that it just feels very generic. And it's interesting to me that, you know, they wanted to make this part of the Cloverfield universe, and I guess this kind of brings us full circle. You know, they wanted to make this in the part of the Cloverfield universe, and one of the ways that they had done that, I think, was with that second movie, really finding a way to add something really unique to the genre. You know, they were playing with a lot of different types of genre there, with that 10 Cloverfield Lane film. And I just don't feel as though they were really as able to do that with this movie as they had before. Because it did feel more like a lot of the space adventure type movies that you've seen many a times, rather than kind of like truly adding something. I don't know. I think that's just the issue that I run into.
Yeah, I get that. And it definitely, with both of us being Star Trek fans and sci-fi fans as well, there are some common sci-fi movie and TV tropes you see that are in this movie. Like, oh no, something is broken and one of us has to go out there and fix it manually. How many times have we seen that?
A few. So and one of us is going to die doing it. So...
or I'm going to sacrifice myself for all of you, or something busting out of someone. Being an Alien fan, yes. But I still felt like at the end of the movie that I like the kind of horror approach they took to it, because it did really get me with some of their jump scare situations. And I did feel like, especially with Ava's monologue at the end, that really pulled on my heartstrings. So I still, even though I didn't love it, definitely not as much as the other two movies, I felt like it was making a point, whether it was JJ's point or somebody else's, that life is very precious and that you don't know how much time you have with the people that you love. And so you should hold on to them as long as you can.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with you. If there is any theme in the movie, it is definitely that one. And I wish they had just found a kind of a better way to find their way into that with the storylines, with the characters, because I think that definitely would have helped. This one is interesting because I would say of the two, this one has the least popular critical response.
Correct.
And so...
Yeah, I was shocked how low.
Yeah, it's really bad. And so I am kind of wondering for you at this point, would you want to see more, Cloverfield movies?
I would. I think it's possible. I think they just need to revert back to what they were pulling on for Cloverfield and 10 Cloverfield Lane rather than this one. I feel like this one, for both of us, it just kind of strayed too far from the themes and the sci-fi nature of it that they were going for before. And I think that, like we both said, it spent so much time trying to tell you the wrong answers than to make you think more about the things that mattered. So I think you can, and I would like to, but only if it's good, which there's no guarantee. So, we'll see.
Yeah, that's very true. No, I agree with you.
What about you?
I don't know. I don't really have a solid answer, I don't think. I think that this one showed maybe the limitations of this if it not done correctly. I think this one specifically, it was something where, again, we felt like they kind of answered all the wrong questions and didn't answer all the questions we really wanted to have answered. And I think part of that is that something special happened with 10 Cloverfield Lane when they decided to make it part of the Cloverfield universe. And I think this proved that they don't necessarily know what that formula is to do that. But I would say that we maybe thought of something, which is that you have to be, you need to keep things more mysterious. And so...
Yeah, don't go back and try to create a genesis of everything that comes about in the other two.
Yeah.
Be your own thing.
Yeah, I mean, hey... Terminator Genesis had the same problem, so but that's a whole other podcast. Actually, we've already done that podcast. It's back in the back catalog. So I don't know, Christy. with this one, where would you head with your rating because I feel like this is kind of a paradox.
Ha ha ha.
Yeah, that was a bad joke.
It's okay. For me, and since we've been doing out of 5 lately, I'll switch gears and make it a little bit easier and do out of 5. I'll say I would give it a 3 out of 5 and put it right there in the middle, because I did really enjoy some things about it and definitely thought the cast was great, and that it didn't have anything to do with them why it didn't do well with like critics. So like I said, I think 3 out of 5, because I still got a moral to the story for me, and I think that you can get something out of it, but I do think it had these disconnected pieces that could have been done better, and certainly made it fit better with the other Cloverfield movies. If you're trying to do them all in the same universe, you need to find a way that ties them together without it feeling like, and we put this monster at the end, remember Clover? So that's it for me.
Yeah, for me, this one is 2 out of 5. It kind of falls below the average level for me, and that part really comes from the character arcs not reaching, a place that really kept my interest during the movie. And so, it is disappointing that this, and I can see exactly why they did not release this in theaters, because it would have gotten destroyed.
Yeah.
So better to sell it for however many millions of dollars to Netflix, so they can stream it and try to recoup at least, I guess part of the money. So, I have no idea how the studio's residuals work on, numbers and all that for streaming. But yeah, this one just was definitely a misfire. I think they tried, because, it worked so well with 10 Cloverfield Lane, and it just doesn't work here. And, hey, it's okay. Not everyone's going to be a winner. So going forward, who knows whether or not they'll try it again. But after that, I feel like it's time for some recommendations. And woohoo! So, Christy, what do you want to recommend to everybody this week?
Well, I could not remember if I had recommended it before, so I'm going to throw it in here just in case I haven't. But don't know if you guys saw that there was a Stranger Things 4 teaser on Instagram today as of September 30th. So if you're listening to this later, then you know. But Stranger Things, I highly recommend, especially if you like Stephen King stuff. It's highly inspired by that, and is really a coming of age story of a group of kids that, we've even talked about on this show. It's just an incredible show. So I highly suggest it. I thought that Stranger Things 3 was the best out of all of them so far, so I can't wait to see where we go with 4. And their slogan for 4 was, "We're not in Hawkins anymore." So we'll see where that goes.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, strange if you haven't watched it, talk about a strange thing, because we've covered all 3 seasons here on the show. So, you definitely do want to check that out. I already recommended it in the show, so I'm going to recommend that you watch The Night Manager, which is one of the best shows out there. It's an incredible 6-part series. It is, I believe it's still on Amazon, and so it's totally worth watching. I remember watching it with my wife, and it was one of those shows that was so intense, we could not watch more than maybe 2 episodes at most a night, because it was just one of those where like, what's going to happen? You're on the edge of your seat. Again, Tom Hiddleston and Elizabeth Debicki are in the show. They're phenomenal. Hugh Laurie's in the show as well. He's amazing. It has just a great cast. Actually, Tom Hiddleston in this show was he showed me he could actually be Bond if they wanted to use him. Really good. So it is just a fantastic show. I highly recommend it. And I think, if you're looking for an incredible spy suspense, type of show, this is definitely for you. So yeah, I'd check it out.
Well, that was a lot better than my recommendation. You sold it.
Well, good. I'd love for you guys to watch it and hear what you thought, because it truly is like, it really was one of those shows. Like I would look at my wife and be like, do you want to watch another one? And she'd be like, no, tomorrow. Like it just
it's too much.
Yeah, it is. It was really stressful. So great show. But Christy, if people want to catch up with you and be able to see, what else that you have going on, where can they find you online?
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at BestBenBell. And in addition to being on the 602 Club, of course, here with Matt, I do a show with my friend Teresa called Sabers and Spells. We've taken a little bit of a break, just had some personal stuff going on, so sorry about that. But we are back, and we should have an episode dropping this week, so stay on the lookout for that. I also do a show once a month called Planet Leia on the Fantatrax Network, where it's 6 women from around the world talking about our viewpoints on Star Wars. We are talking about Triple Force Friday this week, which is October 4th.
Woohoo!
I know.
I'm going to
so
spend
excited.
way too much money.
Yeah. And then
I recommend Triple Force Friday.
Yes, and Star Wars. And then, of course, once a month I do a 5-minute segment called Fashion in 5 with my friends, The Star Wars Report.
Well, and you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd, and Vero, all in the same name, MattRushing02. You can find me here on the network. When we get a chance to record, Chris Jones and I do the Orb talking about Star Trek Deep Space Nine. I'm over on the Nerd Party Network doing 2 shows. One is Owlpost or Drea Kaufman talking about Harry Potter each and every week. We just started the Half-Blood Prince, so really excited to be into that. You can also find me over on Aggressive Negotiations with John Mills, where we do talk Star Wars each and every week. In fact, we just had 2 weeks where we were celebrating Clone Wars with some great guests. Nick Anastasio, editor of the Clone Wars, and then Henry Gilroy, who helped create the Clone Wars, as well as writer for the Clone Wars on. So you're going to want to check out those episodes. It's so much fun. And then last but not least, I do Cinema Stories with my good friend Courtney, where we talk about films through the lens of faith. So I think it's time to say thank you so much for joining us.
And Daniel Noah owes me DVDs of Indy.